This funding includes $62 million in ongoing or continuing multi-year projects, $77 million in major new school designs or additions, almost $26 million in mechanical upgrades, over $21 million for roofing repairs, over $41 million in structural upgrades, and almost $18 million for accessibility upgrades. We're also investing $9 million for improving science lab upgrades and $5.5 million for modular classrooms to address immediate enrollment concerns. The additional funding and an accelerated schedule could have the last of the 20 new schools start design in 23-24 for completion in the fall-winter of 2025. This is up to 5 years ahead of schedule. These schools are a critical part of improving the learning environments so students can succeed. We are proud to have opened 4 new schools across Manitoba since September 2020. Budget 2021 made a record investment above $3 billion in the public school system. This includes up to $160 million for COVID-19 costs through the Safe Schools Fund to keep students safe. Our $1.6 billion funding guarantee represents a 4-year funding commitment. This includes $750 million of additional operating funding and over $900 million of capital funding. The $750 million in operating over 4 years is based on a 2.5% annual growth over the 1920 summary education budget. Our government is committed to supporting education and making sure that we have the resources and the classrooms available for front lines of education. We will support our students, our teachers, and staff with the resources they need. With that, I'm prepared to take any questions you may have this morning.
Up first this morning from CityNews, Jonas.
Good morning, sir. Maybe just a breakdown on this 5-year speed up in this construction of new schools. Seems like quite an extreme jump. In the text it says it could be built by 2025. I guess just a thought on the chances of this and the effort that's going to have to go in to speed this up by 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously we recognize, classrooms are vital for education here in Manitoba. We've had established a baseline for capital. We decided to accelerate that capital investment. So we've committed an additional $350 million over the next 4 years. So we believe that we can achieve quicker outcomes in terms of our 20 new school commitment. We're optimistic we can get there, 5 years ahead of plan. Obviously, there's a lot of variables when it comes to building schools. I mean, there's acquiring property, and then there's the tendering process and so forth. So it does get quite complicated, but we're quite optimistic we can achieve our goals ahead of schedule based on the additional $350 million of capital over those 4 years.
Thank you for that, sir. When it comes to operating, it's in there, Manitoba Education announced a 1.56% operating increase for 2021-22. This operating increase, about half of, inflation when it comes to contracts or cost of goods, give or take, with inflation. This is, of course, something that school boards have been looking at and saying this is going to, actually take money out of our pockets. Just thought maybe on how they should address this apparent funding gap.
Well, certainly we all have to make, difficult decisions when it comes to budgets. We certainly our 1.56% commitment, obviously new and additional money for school boards. We also indicated to them that we wanted them to freeze the property taxes for local homeowners and business. And we are actually providing that 2% increase, which amounts to an additional $23 million over and above the $21 million to school boards. So even though we've asked them to make that commitment, we feel that we've more than offset that property tax revenue. So along with government having to make tough decisions, we're also asking school boards to make those decisions as well. I will say, we've set aside $185 million for the Safe Schools Restart to combat COVID. So any additional expenses that they encounter relative to COVID, we anticipate we will be covering off through that fund that we have established.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Carol.
Good morning, Minister. Just touching on that, the $85 million set aside for COVID costs in schools. With the rise in the number of COVID-19 variant cases that are causing more serious illness in younger people, the Teachers Society is advocating for frontline school staff to be prioritized for vaccination. Do you think they have a legitimate concern, and should they be made a priority to receive the vaccine?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Carol. First of all, I will say, we had the original fund was $185 million. We think by the end of the school year, we will have spent about $150 to $60 million of that fund. So we did have a carryover in our budget, and actually we've actually increased that. So for this budget year, we have allocated up to $160 million for COVID expenses. So we actually set aside money over and above the original $185 million. Obviously I share their concerns about COVID and the variants we see ourselves in. I know we're working closely with our public health officials in terms of making assessments in schools. We feel for the most part schools have been safe up till now. We recognize that teachers and staff would like to get these vaccines. So many other agencies and organizations are coming to us and to Manitoba Health asking to get on that list as well. So I know Manitoba Health, through the public health officials, are looking at what the vaccine rollout will look like and whether there will be changes in terms of who's getting those vaccines. So I appreciate the information coming from the Manitoba Teachers Society, and obviously we feed that information into public health, and at the end of the day, public health will be making recommendations when it comes to the vaccine rollout.
And there's the $185 million, for the COVID costs, but Seven Oaks School Division says it's had to source its own N95 masks to protect their school staff because it wasn't able to secure its supply through the province. And last week, the finance minister said that there's, an abundant stockpile of PPE for healthcare workers, a 235-day supply of N95 masks, for instance. Why isn't there a stockpile of N95 masks for school divisions to access?
Yeah, well, you could probably get more information from public health on this, but the N95 masks are special medical grade masks, and the public health officials have told us that that type of a personal protection equipment is not required in schools at this particular time. So that's been the direction from public health officials.
From the Brandon Sun, Kyle.
Good morning, Minister. You mentioned that 20 new schools will start designing in 2023-24 for completion in the fall or winter of 2025. Does that include the DSFM school in Brandon that you guys announced funding for back in January?
That's correct. That is one of the 20 schools. The 20 schools, some of these are opened, some are in design phase, some were actually in the process of acquiring property to site the schools. So we could follow up in terms of the specifics of where that process is for the DFSM in Brandon. But last I understood, we were still looking at acquiring property for that school.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of how this capital funding will be allocated, will you guys be distributing it on a division-by-division basis, or will you be distributing it to school by school, as is outlined in Bill 64?
Yeah, our capital, obviously, we have assessments of our needs across the province. So we have a number of different categories. We have the usual upgrades that are required in some of the smaller projects, whether they be roofs, mechanical, accessibility issues. We try to deal with those as they come in. We make a prioritized list of those respective schools that do need work, and the allocation is based on those priorities. When it comes to the larger capital investments, such as additions to schools or new schools themselves, we look at the population demand for those particular schools and in what regions of the province that they are required. So those decisions are based on priorities that are provided, through the school boards. We as government then will make the assessments in terms of where the resources could be best utilized. And again, it's about providing the right resources to our students and teachers.
From CJOB, Skylar.
Good morning, Minister. Thanks for your time today. I guess I have a question about, public health officials have told us the third wave of the pandemic is here. Luckily, we haven't seen the numbers that some of our provincial neighbors have quite yet. I'm just wondering if the education department is looking at a change of direction in terms of protocols, procuring PPE, anything like that, as we're ready for what public health officials tell us is coming with an uptick in cases and transmission.
Yeah, we've always tried to stay one step ahead in terms of making sure that we have personal protective equipment available. That's why we've set aside in this year's budget, beginning April 1st, for schools, $160 million. Again, this is over and above the 185 we'd set aside last year. So certainly we have resources committed to COVID. We don't know how long we're going to be in this COVID battle. I too, obviously watching what's occurring in our neighboring provinces. Obviously we have concerns about these new variants that are attacking society. We're obviously mindful of that. We're working closely each and every day with our public health officials. We take our guidance from our experts in public health. And, up till now, certainly our schools have been safe, and I think that's hats off to the people, the teachers, principals, and staff that have been working in our schools for the past year to both keep our students safe and keep our staff safe. We recognizing this pandemic is a very changing dynamic, and we want to make sure that we're ahead of the curve. And as a result, we have set aside money to deal with that. We can be quite fluid, and we will take our advice from our public health officials.
Thank you for that. And as the province prepares to continue to add not only education slots, but childcare spaces as well, a substantial number, almost 11,000 spaces, and I believe 1,400 childcare spaces, just over that. Are we confident that the province can find enough teachers to satisfy all these open spaces without putting a detriment to the existing teacher to student ratio? And B, is the province prepared to have the money to staff all these teachers? Because we know teachers are in high demand these days, especially amid the pandemic, very busy.
No, I appreciate that for sure. The capital investment is obviously one issue, and that we're addressing the capital side by the addition, of $350 million extra dollars in terms of capital investment over the next 4 years. So that certainly is one component. The operational side of it is another. And by reflecting on our $1.6 billion increase in investment in education over the next 4 years, I would say that we are showing Manitobans that we are serious about funding education here in Manitoba. And it's certainly reflective of the budget money that we are committed to here in Manitoba over the next few years. So we're committed to making sure that we have the frontline resources available for Manitoba teachers, for Manitoba students. And certainly when it comes to daycare, we know parents are asking for those daycare places. And obviously funding of staffing will be a priority for us here as well. And quite frankly, when we look at funding education, that's part of the reason we got involved in the K-12 review, recognizing we want to make sure that students have the best opportunities to succeed. And we think by some realignment in terms of the governance model, we can redirect $40 million from administration to the front line. And the front line to me means potentially additional teachers, additional education support staff, and clinicians to do evaluations. So, we're committed to making sure that we have the resources at the front line to provide teachers those resources.
Thanks very much.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Josh.
Good morning, Minister. Josh Aldridge from the Winnipeg Sun. I know, especially in light of COVID-19, one of the big pushes was for improved ventilation at schools. With this capital plan for 2021-22, I see a lot of specific things, but nothing for ventilation. Or would ventilation fall in under different outlays, whether it's mechanical or some of these other categories that are listed in the press release?
Yeah, that's correct, Josh. The mechanical component would cover a lot of the ventilation issues. If you would like a further breakdown, we could probably have a conversation with Central Services and see just what those particular projects are.
And you talked about the $1.6 billion over 4 years. We saw a little bit of that this year. Do we know what the breakdown is going to be over the next 3 years for that extra $1.6 billion?
Well, I think, there's two components. One is obviously the capital. So we're committing over $900 million of capital in terms of education funding. So that is obviously a major component of it. The other component, you will recognize that we have made a commitment to Manitobans to reduce their property tax levy as it relates to education. We made that commitment in our budget. We will be committing to 25% of that reduction this year, an additional 25% to a total of a 50% rebate on homeowner taxes next year. So we're certainly committed as a government to cover those costs. That is obviously going to be reflected in our funding of schools, and that's reflected in the budget. So it's we look at that over a period of time, and easily $750 million is committed to covering those types of. I guess we'll look at it as a rebate for the next few years.
Thank you.
Our final reporter this morning from CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Hello, Minister. I just wanted to touch on the ventilation question again, because in here it says increasing replacements and upgrades to ventilation. Is that part of general maintenance, or is that in reaction to COVID-19?
Yeah, I would say that there's probably both to that, Jeff. Obviously, a lot of our schools are older structures, quite frankly, and they do need mechanical upgrades. Heating, cooling, HVAC, those systems do need upgrades. I would say we are very cognizant of the implications of COVID. I think our engineers and people in central services recognize that, and I would say they reflect on that, and the COVID would make an impact in terms of their priorities, in terms of where they see money wanting to be invested.
And I know you've touched on this, and we talked to Dr. Roosin about it the other day, but as the education minister, are you optimistic, confident that students will be able to make it for the end of the school year, not going all remote?
Yeah, I guess I'm cautiously optimistic. I think our educators and our staff have done just a tremendous job over the last year, keeping our students safe and keeping our educators and our staff safe. Clearly, we're mindful of what's going on in other jurisdictions in the country, and the concerns that we see there, especially with the new variants. We'll be working very closely with public health to make sure that we keep a very mindful eye on this, and we engage on a daily basis with them, and I know they're monitoring situations as they develop in schools across our province. So it's obviously a concern for all of us, but we are watching it day by day, and decisions may have to be made, but we'll seek advice of our experts in public health on that front.
Thanks, everyone. This concludes our media briefing.